Welcome to Comsverse. This session is called The Rise of WebRTC in Corporate Communication and will be presented to you by Christopher Gustafsson. Take it away, Christopher.
Thank you, Martin. Hi, everyone. This is Christopher Gustafsson from Hive Streaming presenting this evening's The Rise of WebRTC in Corporate Communication. I'd like to first start off and state the fact that I'm expecting this to take about anywhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 minutes, depending on exactly how deep we want to dig into this. I'd like to start by presenting WebRTC in general and the basic premise of the technology in itself. So what is WebRTC? Well, WebRTC is essentially a web-based application framework that allows for real-time communication across web applications. The WebRTC project in itself is an open source project supported by Apple, Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, and many other developers across the internet. Essentially a joint project that incorporates most of the internet community at large at this point in order to have one single framework to actually maintain and develop these kind of abilities. It's available for any major OS that's out there right now, so anything from Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and so on and so forth, including Android at this point actually, as well as the native Teams application that actually supports this as well. And this is something that's naturally very important to any Microsoft customers out there, given the fact that this essentially allows for the Hive technology to be deployed across an entire corporation with minimal, if any, effort whatsoever in terms of deploying additional software, given the fact that the Teams application at this point is essentially ubiquitous across corporate communications. The Hive Stream technology essentially leverages the WebRTC framework in order to run what we refer to as the Hive agent. That is essentially the piece of technology that enables peer-to-peer communication across multiple devices on local area networks instead of actually fetching fragments directly from CDNs, and therefore reducing the amount of network egress bandwidth as a result of actually running what we refer to as a eCDN internally within the networks themselves, rather than fetching information straight from the CDNs using any internet breakout points or any other kinds of connections directly to the Microsoft Azure infrastructure. So the Hive Stream technology, why would you choose that? Well, the first and foremost benefit of the Hive WebRTC technology in itself is the fact that given the prevalence of WebRTC enabled devices at this point, the technology itself is extremely zero or low effort to actually deploy within the corporation itself. It leverages a instant activation in Office 365 via GUI switches, which means that with at the most 24-hour replication period, your entire Office 365 tenant across all Microsoft platforms can actually be enabled and activated for use with Hive WebRTC. The technology itself, as I mentioned earlier, does not require any special dedicated software to be deployed within the corporation itself. All of the relevant information is loaded as part of a streaming event by the nature of the platform activation, so to speak, which essentially means that all you have to do is ensure that the endpoint devices have either the Teams application available to join live events across any of the Microsoft platforms, or utilizing a WebRTC browser, which is essentially any browser that's available today that is based upon the Chromium framework, which includes Google Chrome and the new version of Microsoft Edge, as well as Firefox, Apple Safari on Mac OS, and any other applications that essentially build upon any of those core projects in themselves. When it comes to technology itself, as I mentioned earlier, the Hive technology incorporates three different parts of the Hive technology incorporates three different parts. The first and foremost feature is the network egress points load minimization technology. So essentially, the information that or the capabilities that actually allow endpoint devices to utilize peer-to-peer communication to share fragments downloaded directly from the Microsoft Azure CDN. The two other pieces are essentially a technical analytics platform that we refer to as the Hive Insight Report, as well as the other piece that essentially tailors more to the production values of a video broadcast communication strategy and production values of the individual events. That we refer to as the Hive VI or video index. So essentially a tool that not only allows you to gauge the overall quality of experience of a given event or a series of events, but also allows you to gauge the overall production and uptake of the or the user engagement index, so to speak. So as I mentioned earlier, the technology supports all platform, which includes both the legacy Skype meeting broadcast, as well as the more or the modern versions, which is Teams live events, as well as Teams live events using external encoder. And that goes across Stream and Yammer as well. So it's not only for Teams itself. One of the other major benefits to the Hive streaming technology is that in these times when we have a large portion of the workforce actually working from home, the Hive technology, due to the deep platform integration that we have with the Microsoft platforms themselves, we can actually build an extended buffer to the endpoint devices, regardless if they're appearing or not with the other devices located on the same networks, which means that for any users that are located on home internet connections or any kind of unreliable connections, the Hive technology in itself actually allows for an additional layer of security in terms of quality of service, essentially, to the endpoint devices by building an additional buffer on top of the existing buffer of the video streaming platform in itself. Another major benefit of this is also the fact that the Hive technology functions within the inherent latency of the video streaming platform in itself, which means that not only do you get the benefit of an extended buffer, but you also avoid the addition of additional latency to the streaming technology in itself. So you can enable the Hive technology without actually impacting the overall broadcast of the events in any way. One of the major benefits, as we talked about earlier when it comes to the Hive technology, and especially the WebRTC version, is the fact that it's completely or minimal in terms of deployment efforts. So you don't have to deploy any additional software in itself. The activation in itself goes directly through the Microsoft interface, which makes it very easy to actually enable. And as soon as you enable and the tenant has actually had time to replicate the changes, the entire tenant is essentially activated, and the endpoint devices will leverage the WebRTC technology if they're capable of doing so with any live events scheduled after the fact. This actually allows many of our customers to actually deploy the WebRTC technology within 24 hours. And then essentially get going straight away with the Hive technology without any major concerns, either for technological or security purposes, given the fact that all the Hive technology does is essentially function as a transportation layer to the video streaming platform in itself. When it comes to the analytics platform, that's one of the other major benefits of the Hive technology in general, regardless if you're actually utilizing the peering technology or not. The Hive technology essentially allows for a detailed analytics view of the technical performance of your endpoint devices, and down to an endpoint device level across your entire event and across the entire duration of the event itself. So not only do you get a high degree of transparency when it comes to what the overall endpoint device experience or endpoint user of an endpoint device is, you also get the ability to do detailed troubleshooting as part of the analytics performance, essentially allowing you to not only figure out if a user had a problem during an event itself, but also figure out what the cause of the issue was, what the nature of the issue was, and then utilize this information as a way of narrowing down what any potential quality of experience issues may have been caused by during the network itself, which means that not only do you get analytics for the event itself, but you also get a very much enhanced ability to actually troubleshoot any performance issues that may crop up during events themselves. And it also naturally helps to visualize any quality of experience issues that endpoint users are experiencing but are not properly communicating to the production team, which is quite usual. When it comes to the Hive VI solution, which is the other piece of the analytics platform that we talked about earlier, the Hive VI report deals less with the overall quality of experience when it comes to the technical details of the report of the events themselves, and looks more into what the overall uptake is of your video communication strategy in general. First and foremost, what it does is essentially takes all of the metadata that Hive collects as part of the analytics tools and as part of actually enabling the peer-to-peer technology across the corporate network in general, and collects all of this information into one giant report that essentially correlates all the information across multiple events, multiple platforms, and different types of events as well, which essentially allows you to not only gauge the uptake on an individual event basis, but actually start to look at trends over time, what the overall attendee period of viewers is like. So if you have viewers dropping off early or at specific portions of the event, or anything else that for one reason or another may cause the communication strategies to essentially not be as effective as you would expect it or want them to be. The Hive VI reports also allow you to gauge what the overall uptake is of the technology and the prevalence of different devices, for example, which means that you're much better equipped in order to determine how your video is actually being consumed in the first place. What kind of devices are consuming the events themselves? Where are they located when consuming these events? Are you having scenarios, for example, where people may be consuming live events to a certain extent, but then viewing them as a VOD asset at a later date? All of that information becomes available with the Hive analytics tools that essentially the Hive VI and Hive Insight reports provide you with, and it helps with not only gauging the overall production values of the events themselves, but also the success of the overall video strategy in general across the corporation. So that being said, the Hive technology not only allows for the quick and easy enablement of large-scale network broadcasts across a corporate network without actually imposing any limitations in the same sense that different technologies may require, such as on-premise hardware or anything else that may impede the implementation of the technology itself. The Hive technology, as I mentioned earlier, also from a security perspective, does not in any shape or form cache, redirect, reposition, pre-position any content or any of the information that is being transmitted to begin with, which means that all of the security concerns that are part of essentially allowing for live events and VOD events to be present across a corporate communication strategy in general essentially remain intact, and the Hive technology in itself does not in fact influence any of the security concerns of the communication strategy in general, which is also something that helps the Hive technology in itself be a very simple technology to roll out across an entire corporation, simply due to the fact that no information actually leaves the corporate network or is being redirected at any time. And naturally, this also means that Hive at no point actually has either access or the ability to actually decode or in any shape or form manipulate the information that is actually available to the endpoint device, or that is being transmitted using the Hive technology in general and propagated across the endpoint devices. And naturally, the other major benefit over the WebRTC technology in general, and given the fact that it's a web application framework, that means that as soon as one of the events finishes or the event itself is terminated on the endpoint device for one reason or another, any of the devices that were consuming events and had any kind of data is automatically purged as part of the framework being unloaded, which means that the Hive technology in itself does not leave any residue on the endpoint devices in any shape or form, essentially meaning that from a house cleaning perspective, the Hive technology is also very simple to enable within the corporation to begin with. One of the final things I would also like to add to the considerations when it comes to Hive in general is that, as I mentioned earlier, the low-level platform integration that the Hive Stream technology has also comes with a number of security benefits from a statistics perspective, which means that the Hive technology in itself is deeply integrated into the platform once enabled on a tenant level, which means that all of the potential security holes that could be enabled simply by having a piece of software residing on the endpoint devices is being addressed by the fact that the video platforms Microsoft utilizes, for example, actually interface with the Hive streaming platform in order to validate any packets or any data that is being transmitted by the Hive streaming technology itself during an event, essentially resolving any security concerns from that perspective as well. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, the technology in itself is extremely simple to deploy to begin with. It can be done within 24 hours with minimal effort, and the enabling of the technology in itself, given the fact that we actually allow for or the technology actually fetches information straight from the Microsoft Azure CDNs, does not in any shape or form risk the overall quality of experience or the production success of the event in the case of catastrophic failures across the Hive technology, for example, which is something that's also makes it a lot easier to start or get started with to begin with. And that's actually all I had to say at this point. So if we have any questions, I'd like to take those straight away.
Thank you, Christopher. I'll be watching the Q&A section here, and we have no questions that have come in yet. Anything you would like to elaborate on?
Oh gosh, yeah, I could actually sit here and spend hours talking about different things, but no, at this point, I believe that's about it, to be perfectly honest with you.
All right. Thank you very much, Christopher. If you would like to talk to Christopher following this session, you can find him in the session breakout area. Please check the Q&A for a link to join that meeting. And thank you for watching.
Thank you, everyone. Speak to you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.